talk about dispositions, thinking skills and thinking tools, because they all go together. The work of Perkins, Tishman and Costa at Harvard University has really enlightened us about how important thinking dispositions are, the preparedness to think about thinking in particular ways. And they've talked about how intellectual character is a combination of thinking dispositions coupled with thinking skills. First, most crucial disposition is the disposition to be open-minded, to question what is, and consider other viewpoints. The quote from a very famous physicist who said, "It is important to be open-minded, not to the extent that your brains fall out." And I think that's something that's worth remembering. The second disposition is the disposition to be sceptical and seek good evidence and sound reasoning before being persuaded. Let's just do a little survey. Raise your hands if you think that the research would confirm that delaying your child's entry to primary school, is a risk factor for later difficulties with learning and behaviour. So raise your hand if you think basically that delaying a preschool child's entry to primary school because they're young, socially, emotionally mature, whatever, would be a risk factor for later difficulties academically and possibly socially. No? In fact, it is. The research says that children whose entry to primary school is delayed are more likely to go on to have lower levels of numeracy and literacy in secondary school, more likely to be engaged in bullying, more likely to be bullied, and more likely to drop out of school. And yet we have this prevailing assumption that it's always a good thing to consider delaying school entry. As a result, we have 14% of children whose entry is delayed across Australia. 31% is the figure in New South Wales. 22% is the figure in Victoria. And so what we're having, yep. Yes, no. Well, there are some issues there, and I won't pick those up now, but you're talking probably more about Finland, and it's not quite as it seems. It's not nearly as clear-cut as that. Okay. Let me show you a little video clip which explains the importance of this.
What have we got?
RTA, broken arm, suspected internal injuries, severe contusions to the head.
Okay, need to move fast. Put me a solution of Arnica montana. Stat.
Strength?
1 part in a million.
I'm sure it looks serious.
You're right. We need to strengthen the dose. 1 part in 10 million.
On it, Doctor.
We've got a tricky one.
Nothing we can't handle. Get me some wolfsbane, also known as monk's hood, in here. And a whole tray of flower remedies.
Whoa, the chakras are fading. We're gonna need some crystals.
Nurse, fetch me some purple tinted quartz. Damn it, you're right. Make that aquamarine quartz.
Good call.
Okay, he's stabilizing. Now, does anybody know what sort of car hit him?
Blue Fort Mondeo, apparently.
Right, get me a bit of Blue Fort Mondeo, put it in water, shake it, dilute it, shake it again, dilute it again, do some more shaking, dilute it some more, and then put 3 drops on his tongue. If that doesn't cure him, I don't know what will.
You should have a look at this, Simon.
What is it?
I don't think this poor chap's got long to live.
Why not?
His lifeline, very short. But his horoscope's not too clever either. Sagittarius. Brace yourself for a surprise. Things are about to change for you.
Certainly are, unless... Wait.
What?
We could try drawing a bit more lifeline on with biro.
It'll never work.
You got a better idea? Let's see what happens. Damn it. Time of death, 3:34. Ish.
Tough day, eh?
I just can't stand losing them.
It happens.
I don't know. Sometimes I think a trace solution of deadly nightshade or a statistically negligible quantity of arsenic just isn't enough.
That's crazy talk, Simon. Okay, so you kill the odd patient with cancer or heart disease, or bronchitis, flu, chickenpox, or measles. But when someone comes in with a vague sense of unease, or a touch of the nerves, or even just more money than sense, you'll be there for them. Bottle of basically just water in one hand, and a huge invoice in the other.
I suppose you're right.
Now, another drink.
I need one.
Excuse me. 2 more homeopathic lagers, please.
Whoa, that's strong stuff.
Well, here we have homeopathy, and pretty well every research study that's ever been done has shown that it has absolutely no basis in terms of its effectiveness at all. And yet we have people who will still pay huge amounts of money for homeopathic remedies. And this is an example, again, of the not using the thinking disposition, of being sceptical and asking for good reasons as to why you should be persuaded. I'm just going to now do that to get the slides changed. So, okay, so the next one is the disposition to identify problems and wonder how something can be improved. The disposition towards curiosity and the desire to understand why. The disposition to make links between things and ideas and identify how they are similar and different. This is a particularly important one. The work of Robert Mazzano has shown us that teaching students explicitly the skills for finding similarities and differences is one of the most effective strategies for enhancing their learning outcomes. Of course, it can go wrong. We're sort of studying journalism in school this week. Today our teacher asked us what the real difference is between a morning newspaper and an evening newspaper. I told her that when you read an evening newspaper you have the light on, but I didn't get a very good grade. So obviously there are higher and lower quality answers to those questions. Okay. The disposition to be metacognitive, to think about your own thinking, and also to be self-reflective, to think about your own behaviour. And this is an example of Snoopy not being very self-reflective in an accurate way. Our family ate dinner at a restaurant tonight, Snoopy, and I brought you a sugar lump. That should make me happy, but it doesn't. It makes me realise that deep down he'd really like to have a pony. So that kind of unhelpful, inaccurate, reflective thinking is not a good way to go. The disposition is to think carefully about yourself and to think helpfully about yourself as well. Okay. I forgot to make a backup copy of my brain, so everything I learned last semester was lost. Acronyms are a really, really powerful thinking tool for remembering important information. And here's an example that we've used in our own program, Bounce Back, reminding students about what it takes to achieve goals, what it takes to be successful, including what are your strengths, how do you know? It's very easy to say, I think I have this strength, but you need evidence for that. Interesting mistakes will happen, don't be afraid to make them. No effort, no results. Never give up, well, hardly ever. Ethics and decency must be the rule or it's not worth it. Risk-taking is sometimes necessary, but think first. And smart goal setting will help you plan and succeed. So if you can summarise, or if students can put into some kind of an acronym, particularly if the acronym has a word that means something in relation to the content, it's a really good tool for helping them to remember important information. Okay, thank you. So summarising and distillation is also a particularly important one. Again, Mazzano has quite confidently shown us that if we explicitly teach students to summarise and get them to do it over and over, they just get better and better at evaluation and therefore at achieving their learning outcomes. Summarising and distillation is something we often assume students can do. We just tell them to do it rather than show them how to do it. And most students have as their core tool a highlighter, where they go round and they mark and highlight things as if somehow doing that has actually distilled and drilled down to the core components, the most important parts of information. Here are some tools that you can use. When I initially began to use this with my students at the university, they were a bit taken aback. But I'd give them an article and I'd say, this assessment task is you need to read the article and you need to tell me what the 10 key points in this article are, and you can only have 10 words in each of the points to tell me. Initially I went, well, yeah, but you know, what if we need to explain? And my answer was, if you can't do that, if you can't drill it down to the 10 key points and each point in 10 key words, then you really haven't drilled down what is important versus what's not important. You're giving me wheat and chaff. I want to see only the wheat. Similarly, the assumption that students often make is that if an assignment ask for 750 words and they give you 1,000 words, they should get a better mark. And they're often surprised when you remind them that they won't get a better mark, they'll actually get a lesser mark because they haven't, again, distinguished clearly enough between what matters, what's significant and what isn't. They haven't distilled it and summarised it down to the most important ingredients, which is an aspect of evaluation. 30-word summary is another way of using that particular approach. 3-minute thesis. All over Australia, students with their master's degrees and PhDs are entering 3-minute thesis competitions whereby they've got 3 minutes to explain to a panel what their thesis is about, what they're doing, the core features of it, and the students who can do it best are likely to receive the award. But again, being able to say in 3 minutes exactly what you've done forces the student to work out what matters, what doesn't matter, what's repetitive, what's a new item, etc., etc. Abstracts, of course, are always essential in any kind of higher degree, and that's the whole purpose of the abstract. We often tell our students, once they've done their research, now write your abstract before you write your thesis. Because if you can write your abstract and you've only got 200 words, again, you'll drill it down and you'll work out how to plan the rest of the thesis, the writing up around that. And of course, definitive definition. This is where you ask students with a range of online and print resources to write the definition of a key concept in a particular subject area, and to write as many as they can, and then to have a look at all of the definitions that they've come up with, say, a group of 3 or 4 of the same concept, and then to put them all together and then distill it down to the one best definition which sums up the core features that most definitions include and says it succinctly. Okay, this is a multi-focus group thinking tool, which also has a lot of capacity for helping students think well. It also can be used in businesses, other organisations. The basis for this originally was de Bono's 6 thinking hats, but we felt that it didn't go quite far enough, and so this is what it looks like. Oops, sorry. There are 10 parts to this. It's done in a group, because group thinking always allows a nascent thought to start developing in a way that it doesn't occur in just single thinking. So what is this? What do we know about it? What's our knowledge about it? What are the positive sides of it? What is the downside? What feelings do we have with this? You know, and we find that, particularly if you're working with boys, they're more likely to talk about feeling words as thinking words. So they say, I feel this is a good idea because. So they use the word feel, but they're not actually talking about this sounds like fairly scary stuff, or this sounds like something that I'd be worried about, etc. Improvements, how could we make this better, this whole proposition? So, for example, it might be the proposition that we reintroduce conscription, heaven forbid, but that proposition. How could we improve the proposition so that it might be more workable? The thought police, this is where you actually are metacognitive and you think, are we thinking in sensible ways here? Do we have enough information to actually draw the conclusions that we've drawn? Have we made any assumptions that we need to check out? Because in fact they are just assumptions, not necessarily facts. Are there other facts we need to know? And then is it fair, applying an ethical framework to that? Is it something which is fair not just to the general population, but is it fair to specific groups of people, specific age groups, specific gender groups, specific cultural groups, etc.? The 9 is the I think, and so while this is going around the room with students all taking the lead in discussing one, because you've got students in or committees in groups of 5, they're leading the discussion and writing down the comments. So the I think is everybody writes down what they think about this proposition. Then the we think is that they negotiate using the social skill of negotiation to put it together and negotiate a group decision. Thank you. Creative thinking tools. The ABC creativity one, we'll look at that in a second. The random word, the Bono, window of opportunity, an airport, brain and recreate. Okay. Random word de Bono was a tactic that he cleverly came up with, which involved going to a random page, page 49 of any book, line 17, and then taking the third or fourth word along and using that word to brainstorm new ideas. We've created the window of opportunity where you look around the room and as you look around the room, you use each thing that you see as a jumping off point for new ideas. An airport, so this is where you think of all the things in an airport and you use all those words as jumping off points. So it's all the variations on the random word theme. Brain and recreate, we'll have a look at in a second, and ABC creativity. Oops. The brain looks like this. It's one of those beautiful standard approaches to doing something differently. Beautify it in some way, increase or decrease, add more, name it differently, replace or reorganise. This is recreate, very similar. You take each word and you take the object or the idea or the plot or whatever it is and redo it that way with replacing, extending, changing or combining. ABC creativity, let's say you're coming up with a new sitcom, you list all possible settings in the left-hand side, all characters that have ever been in a sitcom down the middle, all plot focus information there, and then you combine them in different ways. So you might put together the restaurant with the lost item and the cleaner to come up with a new kind of sitcom with different kinds of characters. Multi-view, this is a perspective-taking thinking tool where you're looking at parents who want to have a child, that they have a bone marrow donation possibility for their current son. So they use a designer baby, as they're called. And then you're looking at the perspective of the older boy who needs the transplant, the parents, the younger brother, the Catholic doctor who opposes designer babies, and you look at the various columns and fill those in. So it's a different kind of thinking tool. It's a perspective thinking tool. I think we might be done. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
By the time we're 60, more than 90% of us will have known someone close to us who has suffered from some sort of a neurological disorder.
You all know you're not going to live forever. There's only one way into this life and one way out.
I cannot prove to you anymore that anything is possible.
Talk about the marvelous thing that we now understand about our brains.
It gets so much better.